Now, I'm going to talk to you about incubators and accelerators. Now, who here, and please do put your hand up if you don't, doesn't know really what an incubator or accelerator is? For who here is it one of those words you hear and you don't really know what it is? Everyone, essentially, right? Okay. What they do is they find and select promising startups. They give them a level of support, normally some money, often in exchange for equity. They then give them services like mentoring or workshops or other things. And they look to either get the business off the ground, which is more typically an incubator, or take it to scale, which is more typically an accelerator, though they're used quite interchangeably. And I think that they've already played a role in building some very big companies that have gone quite a long way to changing the business world. And it is my firm belief that they can now, in the future and from now, play a very big role in creating more social impact. And I hope that's true, because I have dedicated at least this portion of my life into founding one. I'm the founder of the first ever education technology dedicated incubator program on the African continent. It's here in Cape Town. If any of you are staying for longer than Wednesday, you're welcome to come and see us. We're in the Bandwidth Bar, which Vu just mentioned. We've just opened a new office. And importantly, I'm currently going through equity negotiations with my first cohort. And we talk about something called intangible benefits. And that's the stuff that they can't really put their finger on, but is worth them giving me more equity in their company. So in a minute, I'm going to put a slide up of all of those companies. Please photograph it, put it on Twitter, Facebook, anything. Come to the office and visit them. It's probably worth like 0.5% of equity for me every single time you do that. So please do it. There's three things I want to get across in this talk. The first one is that our big problems, our big social problems, early childhood development, education, yes, but probably other social problems you're interested in as well, are not going to be solved by centralization, and they're not going to be solved by big government. How do I know that? It's because it's failed. It's actually failed pretty comprehensively, in my opinion, in developed countries where government's generally less corrupt and more effective than it often is on the African continent or in other developing markets. But it has failed comprehensively here. And there is, I think, no better example of that than the South African education system, which is very centralized. It's a lot of centralized diktat. And the results are a total failure of business as usual. 58% of children fail their matric, fail to graduate high school. A similar percentage don't learn to read for meaning by the age of 10. And the university dropout rate is about 50%. And that is fairly typically where you get to with centrally government-controlled services up to date now. I'm going to take you through some of the key trends that make me think there is no way that's going to work even that badly in future. The way the future is going, we have to move towards more decentralized services. And in my opinion, in this area, that means entrepreneurs at the grassroots driving more social impact. Secondly, I'm going to try and persuade you that accelerators and incubators are going to be essential to that success, and that's because of scale. I was actually giving another talk this morning. I promise I do other things than talk at conferences. And someone put up this slide, and this happens, and I actually thought the talk was brilliant, the guy gave. This happens a lot in education. People put things up that sound really nice, and then you think them through, and you're like, that's not actually true. And the slide said, talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. Right. That's not true. Okay. Opportunity is not equally distributed. And that's a massive problem, and that's a problem all of us are here to solve. Talent is actually not equally distributed, certainly not in entrepreneurship. There are some people with startups that are going to make a massive impact, whether that's in the business world or in the social impact world. And there are other people that start with startups that make me think of something Christopher Hitchens said. He said, everyone has got a book in them, and for most people, that's where it should stay. Right. A lot of people have got startup ideas. For most people, that's where they should stay, right? It's a good thing that most people don't start that startup they've got, right? Some people have got massive talent, massive drive. They really should do startups, and they really should do social impact startups. And one of the jobs, in my opinion, of accelerators and incubators is finding those people and taking them to scale, because they won't scale on their own. And the final thing I want to persuade you of is that if we get this right, if we get this accelerator and incubator support right, if we get those people with the talent to go to scale, we are at the start of a big bang moment in social impact. And I think a lot of the improvements you've seen in the global economy and global living standards over the last 20, 25 years and more can start happening with more social impact if we get this right. It's a bit about me. Very good intro. I think covered this pretty comprehensively. The main and most interesting thing I've done is I was involved in a very big reform of the UK school system driven by the principle of decentralization. We took power away from politicians and we gave it to teachers and social entrepreneurs who could set up their own schools. The problem with taking power away from people is they don't like it very much, and we weren't very popular at a lot of times, so that's why I had to kind of come away to South Africa. So if this goes wrong, you'll probably next see me popping up in New Zealand, because that's about the only place I've got left to go to. I've partnered with the Cape Innovation and Technology Initiative, who are based in the Bandwidth Barn, which you spoke about earlier, in founding the first education technology dedicated incubator on the African continent. Every continent in the world had, before this year, an education technology dedicated incubator or accelerator program, except the continent that desperately needs technology to turn around its education fortunes. So we changed that. We founded a new one. It's called Ingeni. And what we do is we put out a call every 6 months for applications, and we select the best entrepreneurs on the continent with education technology ideas. We got 171 applications. We whittled that down to 14 who pitched, and we selected 8 entrepreneurs from 5 different countries. This is who they are. This is what we call intangible benefits. Luke and Dominic, who are 2 of our entrepreneurs who are in the audience. This is who they are, 5 different countries. And this is an example of what accelerated incubators can do. Right? Take one company on here, probably the one that's catching your eye is Yo Books from South Sudan. It's run by a pretty incredible guy. He went to school for the first time when he was 17 because he was a child soldier in the Civil War. He founded the only bookstore in South Sudan. And now his determination is to use ebooks and low-tech mobile phones to make books available to everyone in the hardest to reach parts of the continent. Now, even an incredible guy like that is not going to be able to do that on his own. Right? He's going to need a series of partners to help make that happen. And hopefully we can be one of those partners who helps him, but also link him to other people. So to start taking you through some of these things that I want to talk to you about. Top-down's failed. I think that's something we can all agree on. But in my opinion, the key trends are crying out for grassroots solutions. Have I got to move? Am I in your way? Okay. I'm much more attractive than the slides, I promise you. Why do I say that? I think these are things that are sort of obvious to anyone who, if you haven't spent time on the continent, I know some of the people won't have done, trust me, you would be familiar with these trends if you had done. There's a growing aspirational middle class who don't just want better services, they want tailored services. No one in education says, I want more for my child, and I want it just kind of one size fits all, anything goes as long as it's better. People want personalized education, right? And that runs right through services. If you look at what middle class consumers in developing markets are looking for from other services they get, it's personalized stuff tailored to them. That's what they want from their social services as well. Secondly, technology is enabling new delivery methods. Give you a great example of this. Remarkable company in our cohort called Matabe. They have built an offline search engine using artificial intelligence, which is basically a Wikipedia for the Tanzanian school curriculum that works via text message off a mobile phone. You don't need the internet, you don't need data, and you can search a Wikipedia of the entire Tanzanian school curriculum. Right? That would never have been possible before. We've got another company, Mshule. They are doing adaptive learning via feature phones, like the old Nokia 3310. Right? That would never have been possible before. There is totally new delivery coming. And finally, there is a rush to entrepreneurship and social innovation. So as much as I joke about most people's entrepreneurial ideas not being good, it's a generally fantastic trend in that at the moment it's really in vogue to be an entrepreneur, and lots of people are realizing that centralized top-down has failed and are rushing to do their own thing. I think that's a generally great thing. And I think all the key trends in this market are therefore calling out for how can we empower these entrepreneurs to create more kind of grassroots, bottom-up solutions. And those entrepreneurs are there. I think anyone who spends time in developing markets knows that it is not a talent shortage, right? There are probably better entrepreneurs on this continent, better entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia or South Asia than there are in developing markets, because frankly, the need is greater and the orthodox routes are less. The problem is those entrepreneurs are not well supported. So these are, when we were founding Ingeni, we did a lot of work talking to entrepreneurs about, what can we do to provide services for you that help. And these are some of the things that they said. It's impossible to raise early stage money. Investors in South Africa tend to be pretty cautious. It's true of many markets. It's extremely difficult to come along, especially with a social impact startup, and say, I'm going to revolutionize education in East Africa. I don't have a product yet. I don't really have a team yet, but I've got a big idea. Please invest in me. It's super hard to hire people cheaply. Really, really hard to do. You can't get your foot in the door with big customers. Absolutely. You turn up at the DB, you turn up at a big school chain, it's extremely hard to get your foot in the door. Legal contracts, HR, the big stuff. How do you even know where to start, right? No one's in, for example, education technology because they want to write legal contracts or HR contracts, right? That's not why anyone came into it. People came into it to change education, to make social impact. These are some of the things that entrepreneurs need support on. Incubators and accelerators can act as a fulcrum for social entrepreneurs to utilize services and access networks. Does everyone know what a fulcrum is? I realized that when I was reading it this morning. So these are the benefits of a British classical education. It's underrated. A fulcrum is the point at which, it's got a Latin derivation, obviously. A fulcrum is the point at which you place a lever to get purchase to lift it. And that is exactly what incubators and accelerators do. They are the fulcrum at which you place the lever of your startup so that it purchases and takes off. That is exactly what they do. Just some of the things that incubators and accelerators typically do for startups. They introduce you to entrepreneurs and industry players. Super helpful for mentoring and so on. You get funder intros. That's such a crucial thing, right? You just cannot approach an investor as a random entrepreneur, or it's extremely difficult to do so, right? That's one of the things they help you do. Big thing that we do, which is fairly unique, certainly in our industry to us, is that we give massive help with technology. So all of our entrepreneurs get significant help building a product or improving a product. It's so hard to hire developers in South Africa. Legal, accounting support, back office, etc. Relationships with customers and users, super important. Supply chain and sales, channel experts, etc. These are some of the things that incubators and accelerators do. These are all things you need to start a startup, but you would never, or it would be very, very hard for you to get access to on your own. And at each stage of the process, the other thing they do, frankly, is act as an important filter and guide to target resources in the right place. It's kind of get back to what I said at the start. There are only some people who are going to make it, and the future is going to be about a small number of startups making a massive scale impact. That is our future, right? Facebook's used by, 1.5 billion people across the continent. That's the kind of thing that's going to happen. If we're going to use, for example, technology to change education in Africa, it's not going to be because 100,000 adaptive learning platforms are born across the continent. It's going to be because 5 adaptive learning platforms finally give African children the personalized education that otherwise will just be used by people in the West, right? It's going to be because of small number scale. And at each stage, what you do is you select the best people and then target resources at them. And I think that's an extremely important thing. Right. So you select the right entrepreneurs, you develop the right product, help them. As Vu was saying, the main problem people get wrong is they build things people don't want, right? You make sure they build things people want. You give them user and customer introductions so they can iterate and also so they can scale, and you get them follow-on investment. And that's a super important thing, by the way, that accelerators and incubators do, is actually get you the next investment. I think I'm actually missing some text off the middle, but that's fine. There's an opportunity for a big bang in social impact. So I said this at the start. I said that if we target resources in the right places, I think there's a massive opportunity for social impact. And the way we're going to do that is accelerators and incubators. What these bubbles are, on the top there, that is the number of mobile phone users on the African continent, right? So by 2020, there's going to be 725 million people using a mobile phone. That's an absolutely massive opportunity that never existed before to reach more people and to get them social goods, whether that's health or education or other things. Second thing, smartphone penetration, because it's one thing having a mobile phone. It's another thing having a mobile phone that can really make a big difference to your life. Smartphone penetration, by the way, on the African continent is going to be 57% in 2020. It's like 66% in the UK now. Right? So in 2020, smartphone penetration on the African continent will be nearly as high as it is in Britain now. And that's a really big opportunity if people seize it. Final thing is the GDP contribution. It's $110 billion from mobile phones right now in Africa. It's going to be $150 billion by 2020. The big question is, how can we create another social, another orange bubble, which is the social impact contribution that people are making? And that is the big opportunity. In fact, I'll do that in a second. So the big challenge for us is how do we take those first 2 bubbles and contribute to a third bubble, which is more social impact driven. And that, for me, is the big challenge. And that's why I wanted to give this talk and why I'm very pleased lots of you are here. Because the big objective for me is that you go away from this talk not thinking it was pretty interesting, they created lots of intangible benefits, those companies should give that guy like loads of equity, etc. What you should go away from this talk thinking is, how can I make a contribution to making accelerators or incubators more effective in future? So if you're an investor, then there are 2 ways. You can give money directly to a accelerator or incubator, which one or two of the social investors in this room have very kindly done to us, for which we're very grateful. Secondly, you can get involved by mentoring or by trying to be a follow-on funder. And I think if you're an investor and you're not currently interacting with accelerators or incubators to make social impact, and you're trying to make social impact, that's a big mistake. I think if you're in a corporate, or if you're a large organization like an NGO, you can make an absolutely massive contribution to incubators or accelerators. We get super amazing support from, for example, Domicile attorneys, who are a big legal firm for startups. Without their legal support, our startups could never access legal support, right? If you're in a corporate, there is a service you could give for free or low cost to an accelerator and incubator that will then reach loads of startups. If you are somebody with skills, right? There are people in this room who've run brilliant workshops for us. And you are someone in this room, if you can do that, if you can go in and run a workshop, that's going to make a massive impact. If you can go and mentor startups, that's going to make a massive impact. Because you passing your knowledge or your skills to that one startup in the future could make an absolutely massive social impact on hundreds of millions of people. I mean, some of our companies, which I'll show you in a second, are intent on scaling right across the whole continent, and all of them are based on the bottom of the pyramid. And we're quite unique in that focus. They're going to reach potentially hundreds of millions of people with their edtech innovations if they get it right. So that's a really, really big thing you can do. And the final thing I would say is that as rude as some of us often are about the government, as much as decentralization I think is crucial and big government has failed, if you are in government, you have a role to play in that. You have a role to play in making government smarter. I think the Western Cape actually does pretty well at this. And I think that people in government can do a lot. And we've got some support from the Western Cape government to help incubators and accelerators get off the ground and help them drive more social impact. Because I think the big message of this is that we don't have a choice about it. Decentralization is the way forward, and entrepreneurialism is the way forward in terms of making social impact. Those guys cannot do it on their own, right? And we need someone to scale the people who have got the talent, who are going to make the massive impact, to make a kind of Pareto distributed contribution to social change. Because that's the thing that's really going to move the continent. It's going to be a small number of people starting big organizations that make a Pareto distributed contribution. And I think if we get it right, then there is the chance to make a huge impact socially right across this continent, right across other parts of the developing world. Because the thing I often say is that it's not going to be big government or big businesses or big bureaucracies that make the big contribution and the social impact that revolutionize education through technology. It is going to be entrepreneurs. In our field, it's going to be teachers, and it is going to be people like you in this room. And to finish with a fulcrum-related line, Archimedes once said that if you give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, then I can move the world. Accelerators and incubators, or you in your own individual organizational capacity, can be that place to stand, and you can help an entrepreneur with their lever truly move the world in terms of social impact. So please go away, think about the contribution you can make to an incubator or an accelerator, and let's all work together to make an absolutely huge social impact using what's there, using these key trends over the next 20 to 50 years. Thank you very much.